And we're live, streaming from the footsteps of New York City. We are Music Matters with Jason Tramm, and we're so delighted that you can join us for a unique podcast community where we explore the issues and challenges of the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. Thank you so much for helping us get to 1,365 subscribers, and we're going towards 2,500, so please subscribe and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. To see our 135 past episodes for free, join us on our website at www.jasontram.net. We also have a wonderful roster of really exciting artists coming up for the next couple months, so check them out. We'll be adding a lot more very soon, some really exciting announcements. And today's show is going to be just wonderful. We have Cora Perry, one of Canada's leading indie rock artists. She's been a performer since she's 4 years old, a writer since she's 7, and a CEO of a record label and publicity firm at 15. She was a former frontwoman of a major record-signed act, Antihero, and has performed for some of the most important music festivals, including Summer NAMM, Canadian Week, North by Northeast, Pittsburgh's Three River Regatta, the Warped Tour, and Mean Fest NYC, performing for audiences of over 500,000 with her emotional sound and sincere performances. She's been named one of top 10 artists and talent in Canada and has done so much. So we're delighted to welcome her here. Welcome, Rose.
Thank you for having me. I hope that I can live up to this huge standard that you've established for me now.
Well, we're very excited that you're here, and I'm a big fan of your music. So you've started very young. Did you have an artistic family?
No, that's kind of the irony of the situation. So a lot of people come into these legacy families where, they have performing artists for parents or, for siblings or whatever. And so it's fantastic. They're able to kind of hone those skills at an early age. But my mom is actually a fitness trainer and my father's an insurance agent. And while they both love music, that certainly had nothing at all to do with their career aspirations. But there is one caveat to that. Both of them are extremely successful entrepreneurs. So I think that's probably where my business savvy and that background came from. Seeing both of my parents establish and build their businesses from the ground up was extremely inspiring. And I think both of them are absolutely remarkable people. And I'm proud of my parents and I'm proud to be their daughter.
Well, that's exciting. And so shout out to the parents out there. Nothing more important than supporting talented young people like yourself. And boy, that entrepreneurial spirit is so important in the music business these days. So what great lessons to learn.
Oh, absolutely. And I think even more so now than when I got started. Obviously, I'm not 15 anymore. I still look really young, but, we're not fooling anybody on that. And there's been dramatic shifts and changes. And I think one of those biggest changes that we've seen is that more and more and more onus has been put on the artist to really kind of own their career and to be able to navigate it, and being able to understand the industry and really teach yourself a lot of the ins and outs, I think is even more important than it was perhaps than when I got started.
Well, you started young, and why don't we dig in the beginning? When did you first know you wanted to be an artist?
So I don't think I knew. I think it's just I guess I was bit by the performance bug and the vocal bug, particularly when I was really young. I think both my parents noticed that I had a propensity to, gather attention and want the attention on me. And so my parents, saw this and they enrolled myself as well as my older brother into music lessons. And I studied classical vocals for well over a decade. I got my grade 2 in theory and I got my grade 7 in vocal music.
That's near and dear to my heart, as you know. I'm a classical conductor, so I love to hear that.
So I actually did study the right way, so to speak, and then I broke all the rules and did it the wrong way when I became an angsty teenager.
That's so rock and roll. That's just so rock and roll. I love it.
And obviously, what I found from a young age is that music was a really, really powerful way to not only channel my own emotions and be able to find personal catharsis for whatever I was dealing with, but it was such a cool way to be able to experience a connection with people too, because here I'd be up on stage, screaming and belting out, these things that I was angry about at the time. And other people are like, yes, you get me. You hear what I'm saying. And to be able to have that magical connection, you can break down any barriers of difference. And I guess that's why I'd say out of any kind of musician, because there are different kinds, right? There are those who love being in the studio. There are people such as yourself who are extremely technically proficient, and I'm sure you're really passionate about all of that. Then there's other musicians who just love the artistry of it and being up on stage. And I would say that out of any of those musicians, while I do love songwriting for sure, that's a huge part of who I am, I love being on stage. I live for being on stage. So I might not be the most technically proficient or perfect with everything that I do, but to me, it's all about the connection that you make with other people and the incredible power that music has.
Isn't it amazing that you can connect with people? And I think today's indie artists have such an incredible ability with all the platforms that exist to connect with a digital worldwide audience. It's pretty amazing.
I think they do and they don't. I mean, I will be the first to say that I'm pro-internet, but also anti-internet. I mean, on the one stance, obviously, it's broken down barriers to be able to reach a global audience potentially. However, in doing that, it's also allowed anybody in the world to be able to go up and try to get an audience, whether that's somebody who just thinks they look hot on TikTok or Instagram versus somebody who's actually trying to purport themselves as an artist and take this seriously as a career. And that's not slamming on anybody who wants to go up there and, just look hot and get followers, but obviously you're competing with not only your fellow artists, but you're also competing with just everyday people now, which definitely makes it a lot more challenging. I mean, when I got started, to promote a show, you'd physically go out and put 100 posters up on a street post all across your city. You'd put advertisements or hope to heck that you could get a write-up in a local zine, right? Like that was really, really big. And now it's all about this global focus on things like Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. But because they're so global, sometimes it's really, really hard just to reach that local audience and to be able to cater right to that. So I think it's good. It's empowering in one capacity because, yes, everyone can do it. But that's also the problem. Yes, everyone can do it. So there's so much more competition.
Now, how old were you when you first started songwriting?
So I was about 7 years old, and my first song, believe it or not, was all about trying to make the world a more eco-friendly place. So I was writing about oil spills and maybe and how that's really damaging to the environment and trying to look out for each other in that capacity. Because I mean, if you want to be a litter bug and you want to pollute the world, it's not just an act that affects you. It's kind of an inherently selfish act because it affects everybody. We all breathe the same oxygen. We all tread on the same ground. So if you want to do that in your own personal life, that's your choice. But at the same token, you have to understand that it's everybody's air. It's not meant to be owned by anybody. So these actions have greater consequences. So yeah, a 7-year-old writing about this, maybe not understanding the complexity, but I've always had kind of an eco orientation. And so I think that came across in the very first song I tried to write.
So social themes were there from the very beginning. It's been a part of your music making. That's awesome.
For sure. For sure.
And what was your first performance that you remember saying, "This is I got to do this"? Give me a couple early performances that you said, "This is it."
Well, my very first performance ever was singing Castle on a Cloud from Les Mis at a vocal recital. There you go.
I love that song. There is a castle on a cloud. Love it.
I like to go there in my sleep. Yeah. Little Cosette, right? So to speak. But I was 4 years old, and my mom would laugh if I told this story, but it was in the middle of winter. And us in Canada, yes, we get like serious winters.
Yes,
like,
you do.
It's a real legit thing. I mean, I know it's April, but it's actually been snowing this week here in Canada. Meanwhile, in Canada, and so I was wearing this really beautiful dress, and I guess I had forgotten to bring my dress shoes to wear along with this dress. So here I go out in the middle of the stage, trudging in these winter boots and this beautiful dress, and it was just such a Canadiana moment. But yes, that was my first performance.
Shout out to Canada. This is our first Canadian guest. I'm so excited to finally get our northern neighbors. We've had lots of Europeans on because I do a lot of opera people, of course, so there's a ton of my friends over there. But it's so delighted that you can join us, and I love Canada, man. Every time I've been, it's so warm. I went to school in SUNY Potsdam, which is literally 20 minutes away from the Canadian border. So we used to go all the time to Montreal, and I just always love going north.
Well, Montreal is definitely its own distinct cultural flavor as opposed to, I'm in Ontario, so we're in a separate province. I mean, I love Montreal too, but I think they have probably far more in common with Europe than the rest of Canada does, to be honest. And I say that with my best friend being French and from Montreal. I think she's wonderful and I love the culture, but they're their own distinct entity in Quebec, as opposed to Ontario, where I'm from. I'll try
Noah,
not to
Noah
drop
online
too
just said
many.
it snowed in Ohio too, so it's apparently kind of cold in Ohio too right now.
Nice. I'm not the only one then. I didn't have to get the toque back out yet, but who knows what's going to happen. We're kind of at that schizophrenic weather stage right now when we're coming into spring.
Spring's coming close.
Mm-hmm.
So, when was your first big rock show that you said, the boy, rock is going to be the genre I focus on? Because you have an enormous talent for multiple genres. So, you've done musical theater, obviously, you've studied classical. So, you've had all of this great music in your background. When did you focus your attention to the rock genre?
So my first band, actually, it's funny. The classical thing has really intersected through a lot of the things that I've done inadvertently. So my first band was formed following a talent show where I performed Think of Me from Phantom of the Opera. This girl that I had never met before was learning how to play guitar. She came up to me after my performance and said, "Hey, we should form a rock band." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm going to be a Broadway show tunes kind of gal." Like that was initially what my plan was. But sometimes life just has different plans for you. Even if you had your own ideas of how things were going to turn out, life comes in the way, throws a little wrench in those plans. But you know what? It can end up being a really, really beautiful experience. So everybody in that band was honestly just learning to play our instruments for the sake of forming a rock band, because that was what you did when you were cool and young and in Canada and Alanis Morissette was blaring on the radio. So
I remember those times well.
yeah, those were good times. It was, the 90s were awesome. So she was learning how to play guitar. I had no concept of how to sing rock and roll whatsoever. So here I am with my pretty classical voice trying to be like, "I want you to want me." And I'm just like, this is not working. I don't know.
Oh my God,
how to
that's
do
so
it.
funny.
I don't know how to translate, my vibrato and my classical singing into rock and roll. And honestly, I think that's probably been one of the most difficult things for me as a singer, having this proper technique and trying to find my own voice, because there's a huge difference between knowing how to sing and making your voice your own. And I think in my experience and, in my opinion, what truly makes an outstanding vocalist is one that has their own sound, where if you've never heard the song before, the moment that they open their mouth, you're like, that is that person, just because it's so distinctive and it's so them. So
Signature,
I really
right? That signature
exactly.
is so important.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it's a distinct thing for vocalists, right? And I think it's something to really, really aspire to, and to be able to come up with that signature sound. So here we are, we're all, maybe 15, 16 years old in high school, all learning how to play our instruments. But I mean, what I found in rock music that I couldn't find in classical was, I think, just that sense of emotional release and emotional expression. Because I'm sure as a classical fellow, it's all about singing or playing exactly what is written on the page. Do not try to put your own personal spin on it. The dynamics are written the way they are because people like Beethoven and Bach are experts, and don't you dare try to do anything that they didn't put on the sheet music. And I think that, given my Italianness and just my energy in general, I wasn't able to rectify that style of singing with my personality. I needed something that was more expressive, especially because I was writing songs about big issues, not only my own things that I was going through, but social issues. So I needed to find a medium and a genre specifically where I could get that expressiveness. So I think it was when we inadvertently formed this band. I had no idea what was going to happen. Right from our very first performance, I had just kind of this freeing sensibility, like, wow, this feels right. This is not just about singing and being up there in people's faces, but it was about unleashing the beast that is rock and roll. And that's something that, as much as I love classical and as much as I love singing pretty and hearing other people sing pretty, I mean, some of my favorite vocalists are Lorena McKenna and Sarah Brightman, whose voices are pure perfection in my life, in my opinion. But it was something about having that I guess, lack of restriction and lack of restraints. Rock can be whatever you want it to be. That is what rock and roll is.
That's true.
It's all about
I love that.
attitude.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's amazing how finding your sound in rock, and I love how the arts cross pollinate, because so many artists are trained and work their technique, and so it's really interesting to me when I talk to rock singers about you having a technique. You've trained a technique, right, and then
Right.
adapting it for rock. So many singers get their signature sound by like damaging their voice,
Yeah.
right?
Or smoking.
Ooh.
Well, I mean, as much as I love singers like Courtney Love and Joan Jett, like that grit, I hate to say it, but I'm assuming it's probably not all natural. I think it had to do with a lot of hard partying at some point. I mean, both of them have been
Over
fairly
many
open.
years.
Right. Both of them have been fairly open about, alcohol, drug, and, abuse and smoking. And I mean, I understand that that is a huge part of the rock and roll culture, but that's actually something I'm very much against. I don't think that you need to be a partier to be a rock and roller. I think that there can be separation between the lifestyle and the music. And for me, it's always been about the music. And I mean, if I want to put on a little grit, I can, but I mean, God gave me a gift of a pretty voice, so I just had to find how to make that work with the kind of music that I wrote.
Well, your music is resonating because we're getting people who are live from Argentina. I see
Oh,
some from a
cool.
bunch from Canada. I see from my second home in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Shout out to Asbury
Nice.
Park. I live in Ocean Grove, which is right next to Asbury, and I spend a lot of my time there. So your music is obviously affecting people all over the world, and that's how exciting is that?
That's really cool. Thank you, guys.
So now let's talk about your first band.
Sure.
Your first band. What was it like hitting it with a big band, Antihero, and getting to perform at some of the biggest festivals? And how did that happen? And what was it
So,
like?
sorry, Antihero is actually my second band.
Oh,
My first band was Her, and that was the one I was talking about where we were all a bunch of girls in high school not knowing really what we were doing. But as
gotta
a,
learn.
as a consequence of that experience, I mean, what ended up happening is through that and through trying to learn and navigate a little bit about the music industry as a very, very young teenager at that point, I came up with my idea to found my own record label. And the reason for that is because, we were getting a lot of hype behind us. We had a really decent fan base, and I wanted us to be able to release our first album, which ended up being our only album because everyone went to college after. But I wanted to be able to release our album in what would be considered a really professional kind of capacity. So I founded my own label for the purposes of releasing that album so that we could professionalize our career and stand out from just, other teenagers who are rehearsing in their parents' garages and, not taking it as seriously. So based off of the success that that band had, when I ended up going to college about a year or so later after that album had been released, I ended up obviously mingling and finding other musicians that were aware of the history that I had established with that band. We got together, we ended up forming Antihero, which went on to bigger and better things. And it was really, really cool to have that initial experience because it helped prep me for that. So, Antihero, how we ended up getting signed is there are two major music conferences in Canada. At least at that time, they were considered, sort of the big ones. One is called Canadian Music Week. One is called North by Northeast. So we ended up successfully showcasing at both of them. We were getting rave reviews. We had a huge fan base. So we were touring, doing the old band touring in this van that was terrible. It was like an old 80s Chevy conversion van touring all over Southwestern Ontario, really, really getting a good buzz behind us, lots of publicity, good, turnout at shows. We're selling out concerts in our hometown. And so obviously it all came together, which was really cool. And we ended up getting to do Warped Tour for a couple of years and play some really, really awesome events.
So when you formed the band with Antihero, how did you know? When did it start to click? How did you know that when the personnel was right?
I didn't. I mean, I think it's just musicians are musicians, right? I think that you get each other and you can work together or you don't. And I mean, it's not necessarily something that's tangible, so to speak, right? It's either you just get the vibe and you get what we're going for, or you don't. So I think it was just a matter of the right people coming together at that time. And I mean, I could say the very same about my current project, The Truth Untold, wherein the first time I ever played with Tyler, my drummer, it's just like he got my music. I didn't even have to explain it to him. I'd just start strumming, he'd start playing. I'm like, that is magical. That's perfect. That's the way that it ought to be. And I would say the same thing about Antihero. At the time, that's the direction I wanted to go in. So it was cool because half the band was like really metal oriented. So it gave us this harder edge. So we didn't just seem like, you know, another generic rock band. We had this really heavy, darker influence. And then, you know, obviously my classical background combined with the fact I'm a 90s kid, combined with the fact that my dad raised me on classic rock like AC/DC and Aerosmith and Bon Jovi. I have all those backgrounds and influences melding together. It just made for this interesting kind of, I guess we got called grunge revival, because it was post 90s and it wasn't light enough to just be generic alternative. It was on the heavier side, but we weren't heavy enough to be metal. So it was kind of a mix of the two, but yeah.
And so what was it like being this young person, watching it come together, being on the road, getting in front of big audiences, doing it steadily? What did that do for you as an artist?
So I will say that, and I think this is probably still true today, the business of being a musician is very, very exhausting and trying. And when I say the business of being a musician, I mean, you know, having to map out tour routes and having to set up publicity and, you know, be available for all these interviews, and even driving from location to location and eating terrible fast food or whatever's available. I mean,
the
a lot
audiences
of people
don't necessarily know this, right? I mean,
no. It's not glamorous at all. Everything that it requires for you to actually get from point A to point B sucks. I will be the first to outright tell you. It is so much work. And if you don't have enough passion to actually want to perform, you're not going to be able to have the motivation to do all those things. I mean, the amount of people you got to call or email, you know, mailing out CDs, doing this and this, like it is a huge administrative nightmare. But when you love music, for that 45 minutes that you're up there on stage, nothing else matters. That is what you do it for those moments of glory where not only are you just having an incredible experience with the musicians that are on stage with you, your band, you're having this beautiful, magical moment with them, but obviously you're having an even more impactful moment with the audience, the people that are there live in person, not looking through their phones, but taking it in with their real senses and their sensibilities.
Amen,
I mean, that's
sister. That is the excitement of the stage, right? And that goes for every genre. You have to love this. Sure. My mentor was a famous Verismo conductor, and he said to me, he goes, Jason, I was 24 or something like that. If you could see yourself doing any other career, do that. And I think it's the same for any genre. If you can't do it, if this is all you want to do, you have to devote your life to it, just like you did. You have to, because music's a tough business. It's not the glamour. It's great to be on the stage, but the rest of it is the challenge, right?
Well, the rest of it is terrible. And I mean, not to go feminist or anything, but especially being a young woman trying to make it in rock and roll, I mean, the amount of comments that have been issued at me that are inappropriate in terms of whether I'm clearly just the tag-along groupie girlfriend, or, you know, I've only been successful because of my appearance. And I'm like, you know, I've got like 14 years of classical training. I'm pretty sure I know how to sing at this point. I mean, it might not be your thing, but I did diligently study music. You know, I would like to think I deserve to be here because I've also worked really, really hard. I did not come from a musical family. I never got any handouts. Everything that I accomplished, I did myself because of sheer tenacity, working hard, being persistent, but still polite because I'm Canadian, and just doing the best that I could and trying to learn from mistakes. And I mean, obviously there's been as much, I'd say, heartbreak and, you know, disappointment as there have been success stories. And I think that goes for any musician. I mean, even a couple of years ago, we were so stoked. We got an opportunity of a lifetime, only to find out that the whole festival was a complete scam. So I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if over in, you know, the States, anybody was familiar with this, but if you Google search Roxodus, they were claiming that this was going to be the festival of all festivals, like the biggest festival possible that Canada's ever had in terms of rock and roll.
I didn't hear this. This is terrible. Oh my God.
So people like Aerosmith, Leonard Skinner, Nickelback, Big Record, like all these huge names were on the bill. It was supposed to be like 3 days in a row. It was going to be a massive event. We got selected to be the opening act for Aerosmith. So obviously we're like freaking out. I mean, that's one of my all-time favorite bands. It was like a Wayne's World, we are not worthy moment. only to find out the whole thing was a scam. I don't even know if any of the bands were committed at any point. There's so much speculation and different stories, but the company went bankrupt. Nobody got paid. Vendors lost all their
Were they
deposits.
selling tickets already too?
Oh yeah.
Oh, so someone
Yeah.
like went to Europe or went to the Virgin Islands and just took off. That's crazy.
Eventbrite had to bail out all of the customers that had bought tickets. And I mean, these tickets weren't cheap either because they were selling like these luxury camping expeditions and all this stuff. So yeah, that was probably one of the most heartbreaking moments of my
Did
career.
you see the
And
documentary Fire? Fyre?
it was the Canadian version of Firefest. I guarantee. So yeah, look it up. Roxodus. You will not be sorry because it's a hell of a scam that happened here in Canada. And yeah,
what year was that?
That would have been, I think, 2018 or 2019, just a couple of years ago. Yeah, right before COVID.
So I did not hear that. What an incredible story that, you wonder with I watched the Fire documentary. It's very similar, like someone with this idea. Did they go into this meaning to scam people, or was it something that just spiraled out of control? Someone has this great idea, I'm going to make millions, and then it just goes completely sideways. And the worst part is artists like yourself who work your entire lives to put it together, get up there with, make a name for yourself, and then all of a sudden it's all garbage.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself, for sure.
All right, forget about the garbage part of the business. Obviously, you're a fantastic artist. You've worked your life to get here. You ignore the comments. What's it like? How do you rise above all the nonsense and all the difficult parts of being a musician? How do you deal with it yourself? Because you have such a great personality, great spirit. Just getting to know you over the time we've spoken now, I can see why your music is so successful. You're incredibly positive.
Well, thank you. And I think that being positive in life and anything is going to obviously have a ricochet effect, right? So it doesn't matter whether we're talking about day jobs or, how we approach life in general or dealing with the anomalies of the music industry. I think having a positive attitude and wanting to do it for the right reasons matters too, right? I mean, there's a huge difference. And again, I'm not meaning to slam anybody, but there's a huge difference between people who want to be famous for the sake of being famous versus people who are truly passionate about what they're doing. And they're doing it because of that passion. All the accoutrements that go along with that, those are kind of bonuses and not necessarily what the motivating factor is. So I think, and I think a lot of musicians would say this, remember the reasons why you do this in the first place. And that's kind of what keeps you grounded, right? I mean, I've had incredible experiences. Like I would say probably my favorite gig I've ever played in my life was playing at the Whiskey A Go-Go among all these rock stars from these incredible bands and being accepted as though I was one of them. Here they are, they've got 20, 30 years of experience, doing these major headlining gigs, playing with like the drummer from Pat Benatar's band and members of Cheap Trick and members of L7. And it's like, oh, here's Rose from Canada, but they all were cool. And there was no egos. There was no nonsense. We were just all musicians celebrating what we loved. And truly, I wish all musicians were like that because that's how it should be, right? It
the best in the business have nothing to prove, right? They have nothing to prove.
Exactly. And I mean, if we all just stayed focused on the reasons that we're doing this, I think that it would kind of change people's perceptions and perhaps their attitudes. But again, I mean, everybody has their own motives in life. I just think that you should really try to be motivated by positive things as opposed to things that are kind of superficial and not going to ultimately lead fulfillment, right? I mean, it's the same thing that goes without saying. Somebody can be rich and famous, but if they're ultimately choosing to escape their lives all the time by being addicted to drugs, are they actually happy and fulfilled? Did they do it for the right reasons then?
You wonder, so many great artists fall into that trap, and it's really, it's so sad how much great artists are lost to that. It's really, really horrific.
I think it's tragic. And I think that unfortunately the music industry is set up to be sort of a perpetuating cycle in that sense, and that obviously you have a lot of late nights, a lot of really hard times on the road. I mean, then you have to go up there on stage every night and give it, a million volts of energy, everything that you've got. So, and then you have to be able to try to get to sleep at a decent time so you can do it all over the next day. And like, if you're on an extensive tour, I can understand how uppers and downers are going to help in that circumstance, because the lifestyle is not difficult. So when I say, I mean that being a musician is not glamorous, it absolutely isn't. The best part is truly just being up there on stage and being able to share your music with everybody. Everything else is incredible hard work.
Being about the music solves a lot of those problems. And really, you said you were the daughter of a fitness instructor, right?
Yes.
So they're not going to, you obviously want to take care of yourself, because if you can't take care of yourself on the road, you got to find ways to, you got to find ways to channel those negative emotions, right?
Oh, absolutely. Right. And I mean, for me, mentally, music is a huge part of dealing with those inner psychological demons, right? And trying to be able to express that in a positive way. Because obviously, it's a lot healthier to be able to put pen to paper and get those feelings out and, wail on a distorted guitar and just like, yes, F off world right now. I mean, as opposed to doing something that's going to be damaging to myself, either from a psyche stance or from a physical stance. And I mean, I think my mom would be all over my case if I did start to have a reckless lifestyle. So I'm lucky in the capacity that I was raised with two people. I mean, my father too, like both of them are actually award-winning athletes on top of the incredible business things that they've done. But I'm very lucky that I came from a family with those sort of values, because I think that's also helped keep me really grounded. I mean, even pop wasn't in my household when I was a kid. So I haven't had a lot of temptation in that capacity. So I think that's really good. But I also think that it's really, really important. I mean, mental health is something that's huge for me. Being able to find ways to really channel negative emotions and negative thoughts and things that are getting you down in a really positive way. And I mean, it doesn't have to be something that's necessarily works for everybody else, as long as it works for you and it makes sense for you. And what has made sense for me in my life is putting pen to paper and wailing on electric guitars. And that is how I do
incredibly cathartic, right? What a great way
sure.
to get all of your emotions out, to put it down there. Do your songs tend to be autobiographical, or how does your process work?
So I don't have a process. It's kind of really strange in that literally I'll hear a melody in my head. I don't know where it comes from. I can't predict it. I'm not one of those musicians who could ever sit down on command and be told to write a song. I don't work that way at all. It's kind of like this light goes off.
Strikes when the muse strikes. I like that.
No, it totally does. And I mean, again, all musicians work in different capacities, but that's always how it's worked for me. Whether I'm woken up at 3 a.m. because I just hear something, or if I'm just been in kind of a funk because bad stuff happened, a particular week. It's made me very thoughtful and contemplative, and then I'll just hear it and I'll start to put together words in my head, and then I get out my guitar and I try to just figure out the chord arrangement. That's how it all kind of comes together. But 100%, it's always based off of my own life or my interpretation of things that are going on in the world.
When you hear older songs that you've written, I like to tell my students that I teach at a college when I'm not conducting, and I tell my students that music, like everyone, music is like amber. It captures everything around it and it congeals it. Whether it's Beethoven, you have to know what was going on then, or whether it's rock and roll now. When you hear your songs, does it take you back to that place?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, even certain songs are still difficult to perform, right? Because they were just such emotional songs for me to write in the first place that I have literally gotten choked up in the middle of a performance. And I mean, obviously that's showing to my fans and the people in the audience how sincere I am with the music that I'm writing and how I very much want to be able to connect with people. So I think that's perhaps something that people who like my music gravitate towards too, my authenticity and my sincerity. I never try to be something that I'm not. I mean, I can write a 2-minute, 30-second great hit single if I want to, but that's not what music is to me. It never has been. I don't try to write by a formula. I just try to write what I feel and hope that other people can relate to it and we can have that really cool connection.
So speaking about feeling, your work is all over Spotify and all the streaming platforms, YouTube. What's it like when you hear from people across the globe that they respond to your music? They feel it. They feel your passion. What's it like when you hear from your fans?
It's cool. I mean, for lack of a better word, I mean, honestly, even. And I don't say this in any way to sound like a braggart at all, but even sometimes listening to some of my older songs, I'm like, wow, I wrote that. That's pretty awesome. I mean, it's pretty cool to to sit there and be like, that came from me. That was me. Those were my own thoughts. Those were my own emotions. Those were my own music and lyrics. And that came from me. And I mean, I'm proud of that. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that every song I've ever written is incredible, but it was who I was at the time. And it was a very self-reflective thing. And I think it all is kind of part of not just my artistic growth, but my personal growth. So I think it's awesome if my music resonates with people. And I think that's amazing. And I'm happy about that, because I put it out there in the world, hoping that it will do for others what my favorite musicians have done for me. So, throughout my life, I've had different struggles and different battles that I've had to face. We all have, goes without saying. I think we all have emotional baggage. We all have different experiences that we've had to deal with, some good, some bad, some kind of indifferent. And I know for me personally, if I didn't have a lot of the artists that I grew up to listening to, I wouldn't have been able to get through that, because it's that same feeling. It's listening to that and be like, wow, I'm not alone right now. They get what I'm feeling. They get what I'm experiencing. This is such a cool experience, right? And I know that's not perhaps the most articulate way of saying it, but it is a cool thing.
But it's you, it's personal, and I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. So tell us what it's like when you get on a stage the first time in front of a really big audience. What type of feelings that give you? Did they give you?
I honestly, I usually pray that I'm not going to screw up. When I was very, very young, when I was first doing my very first performances in life, so back to the classical stuff, I actually started out, believe it or not, my very first instrument was violin. I was terrible. There was no joy in my ode to it, I assure you. It was absolutely dreadful. So I started out as a amateur violinist and a classical vocalist. And right from those very, very early days, I used to get the wobbly Elvis legs. They go crazy. And I would get extra vibrato as a consequence that I wasn't trying to do. It's because I was so nervous. I found when I transitioned to being a rock frontwoman and fronting bands and having my fellow players with me and being able to share in that energy, that really actually helped with nervousness a lot. However, it really depends on the nature of the venue and who we're playing with and where we're playing to and all those factors, right? And also how tired you are. Like, all those things are going to affect your emotional state, especially as a singer. I don't think people understand that fatigue and hunger. Oh man, those are two things that can hugely affect your performance as a singer. I mean, a lot of guitarists, and I'm not saying this again to be critical at all, but as a guitarist, if you're tired, you can probably still wail and shred. But because the voice comes from within, it's not an external instrument. It's part of me. If I'm tired, you will hear it in my voice. I will sound strained. I will have more difficulty hitting certain notes that usually will come to me at ease. So all those factors obviously come to consideration in terms of how I'm going to perform that night. But I'd say best case scenario, I usually get nervous. I try to calm myself down by having, a little shout out to the universe, being like, I want to do my best here. Please help me do my best. I'm going to go on there and I'm just going to try and give people what they came for. And that's a performance. That's to be memorable. That's to be in the moment. And that's why, again, not to harp on this, but I get so upset when I see people recording things with phones as opposed to experiencing it with their senses. It's meant to be one of those once in a lifetime performances. And to really get the most satisfaction out of it, you have to be experiencing it with your own senses. You're not going to look back on that recording. And if you are, the quality is probably not very good because phone audio is terrible. Let's be honest. It's extremely compressed. You can't hear all of the different dynamics. And it's not nearly going to capture that same sort of energy as you would have experienced if you're just watching that person captivate you on stage. So yes, I get nervous, but I always try to give people what they came for, and that's a performance.
Do you still get nervous when you perform?
Oh yeah. That will never go away. But no. I think that's also part of just the excitement of loving it so much, right? You step out on stage and you're so excited to be there that at the same time it's overwhelming. You're like, holy crap, these people are here to see me. This is so cool. And you don't want to let people down, right? I think it all ties back to the passion. And I think there's a huge difference too. You can see when bands have sort of called it in and they're going out there and they're feeling like they're just going through the motions versus somebody that still gets excited. And I mean, I really feel for a lot of bands that had huge careers back in the 60s and 70s and 80s and are being forced to tour now because they're losing all their money because there's no royalties and illegal downloading. But I mean, to be forced to have to perform in those circumstances, I don't think is fair to any musician. You want to be able to go out there and feel passionate about what you're doing still.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen a few of those. I go to a lot of concerts, and I'm a big rock fan. I love rock. I make my living in classical, but I love rock. I love where it speaks. And my youngest son's a drummer, and he wants to go into the field. And I watch, it's just amazing. And I watch some of the older bands, and they just phone it in, and I'm like, come on, it's so obvious. I mean, I love some of the songs, but it's like you have to love what you're doing.
For sure. For sure. But I mean, at the same time, I feel for them, right? Because they came from an era where it was a lot easier to monetize your career.
Good
and
point.
To be facing all these new boundaries and restrictions because of everything that the internet has done. Again, this is why I said I have a love-hate relationship with all those things. I mean, it's really not fair to them. They should be able at this point. I mean, look at Keith Richards. The guy looks like a zombie. You should be able to retire gracefully and not have to still be performing to make a living. And I mean, on the one hand, people can be like, well, they should have saved up their money and been sensible. Well, how many musicians or artistic people are sensible? I mean, I just happen to be fortunate that my dad's a financial planner, but I don't think most musicians probably have that sensibility. So I don't want to blame them. I mean, I'm sure I would feel pretty exacerbated about that circumstance too, being forced to perform and play songs that I wrote 50 years ago when I just want to retire and live the good life. I put I paid my dues, I put my time in. So I think you have to look at it from both perspectives.
Yeah, let's talk about you were in a big band, you were touring. When did you decide to change? When did you make the transition to be an indie artist?
So I would say that it was, again, one of those circumstantial things. The band was getting really frustrated at the end of our last tour. And the reason for that is because they kept wanting us to push the same album, which at that point had been 4 years old. So we had a lot of new material and we were actually playing a lot of new material at our shows and our fans loved it. And we kept getting held up in terms of going back into the studio to be able to work on this new album. I'd actually already named it. It was going to be called Up the Ante, little play on words. And I mean, I had written several songs for it that are still great songs in my back pocket that maybe I'll release at some point. I mean, I was pretty proud of them at the time. But that was factor one, being held up by the record label, not being able to promote new stuff. Because as it stood at that time with the label we were signed to, we were the #1 selling indie artist they had on their label. So obviously they really, really wanted to push that record. And I mean, hey, I'm proud of that record too. And I think it's a great record, but at a certain point you want to be able to move forward. So I think part of it was the material was getting stagnant. The other part, and this is an unfortunate reality of a lot of bands, is drugs. Unfortunately, most of the members, I'm not going to get into the specifics of who, but most of the members were more interested in the rock and roll lifestyle than just the rock and roll. And obviously that imploded in a really bad way because, people were getting involved into some really nasty illicit habits. And it just, the whole thing sort of enveloped itself in not a good capacity. So I had thought for a while there about getting back into the rock and roll scene, but honestly, part of me going solo and kind of reinventing myself was just needing a mental breather from all of that stuff. Because, here I was, feeling like I was on the verge, almost there, almost breaking through, doing so well with this record. And, we had so much potential as a band, and then everything just went kaput, right? And so here I am left trying to reevaluate my life and reevaluate where I wanted to go artistically and how much of, this sort of background was going to follow me as I pushed forward, and really trying to figure out where I wanted to go. And one of the things, as much as I loved Antihero and Her, both of those bands, one of the things that consistently was told to me when people were being critical is that my voice apparently never came through in that specific genre of rock that I was doing. People never knew I was as good of a singer as I actually am. So they loved the songwriting, they loved the aggression, they loved to be able to relate to, you know, what I was talking about and the energy of those live performances, all really, really positive things. But nobody had any idea that, you know, I had the 3.5 octave range that I do, for example, or that, you know, I used to sing like Sarah Brightman from Phantom of the Opera. They had no concept of that at all. So when I went solo, I had to pivot a little bit because yes, I still love rock. I love hearing distorted amplifiers. I love that energy, but I also wanted
bass drum kicking, right?
Yeah, oh my God, like it gets you all pumped up, right? But at the same time, I wanted people to fully appreciate me artistically in terms of everything that I had to offer. So whether that was being more experimental in my songwriting or really trying to show off what I could do vocally more, I wanted to be able to branch out. And so by going indie, quote unquote, more of the singer-songwriter route, I was, I guess, more freed from restraints in terms of what I had to do, conventionally speaking, in terms of making music. Some people loved that and they could see that I was really maturing as an artist and coming into my own and, you know, not feeling as confined and being able to be a little bit more experimental. But I also got a huge backlash from a lot of people that were diehard followers of that band saying, you know, why would you dare do this? What you were doing was perfect. And it's like, ironically, I wrote all of that material. So it's still the same songwriter. I don't know why you're being so mad at me. And it's kind of like the Soundgarden Chris Cornell thing. There are people who are diehard Soundgarden fans, but they hate Chris Cornell's solo work. Whereas me, I mean, the guy is incredible in either capacity, but I actually gravitated more to his solo work because you could just see he was really allowing himself to express himself in a wider range that Soundgarden didn't allow. And that's not to say there are not some killer Soundgarden songs. There absolutely are. But his solo work takes his artistry to a whole new level. And
he became a singer. He became a real singer.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, that was the same thing, right? I think he always had that capacity, but Soundgarden didn't allow him to show that, just like my former bands didn't allow me to show what I could actually do. So to be able to go solo and make that transition, it allowed me to still have the, you know, that rock and roll, I guess, sensibility and, you know, street cred, so to speak. But I was also able to show more of what I could do on my own and, you know, be able to experiment more. And so now I think I finally got into a place where I've blended and melded all of those things into a good sort of compromise between those two different worlds.
I see stories like this with like Sting with the Police afterwards, and how everyone finds their unique voice. How has your voice changed, and what have you learned about yourself in that journey?
So obviously I learned I shouldn't be screaming all the time, as much fun as that was.
Yeah, I was going to say Chris Cornell, if he screamed like that all the time, he would have lost that voice. I mean,
totally. And I mean, even though I was classically trained, I know I was still doing some naughty stuff that I shouldn't have done, but it's fine. It worked at the time. I didn't do any serious damage. I can still do all the classical stuff I could before, right? So I'm very thankful for that. I didn't damage anything, but I think that I had to learn that there's a way to be rock and roll without, quote unquote, screaming your ass off all the time. I think I had to learn how to be more like a Pat Benatar as opposed to a Joan Jett.
Another classically trained artist, right?
Right.
She sang operetta. Yep.
Exactly. And I love both of them as musicians and front women. They are both incredible. But Joan Jett is all about the grit. And I think I was being too much grit and not enough balance with my natural capacity. Because, I mean, if I've got this natural ability, I should be using it. I shouldn't be abusing it, right? So I think I had to find that as I said, that compromise between the different genres. And I'm really happy with the music that I'm doing now.
So we got a question from a fan. If you were on a desert island, you could only take one of your songs or two or three of your songs right now. And this is like people when they ask me what my favorite opera is or symphony, I'm like, well, whatever I'm doing right now is usually my favorite. But if I ask you what are some of your songs that when you look back, you say, man, that was a great tune. What are some of the songs that rank highly in your catalog?
From what era, or does it matter? There's no.
You know what? That's up to you.
Rules.
Just curious to see as people are going to explore your music. I love to ask the artist what to them is special, like really special, like wow.
So I think probably the song That's the poppiest song that I've ever written, the most mainstream, so to speak. But I mean, it honestly surprises me that it came from me, is Away I Go. I think it's so beautiful with that piano introduction. I love the arrangement of that. In terms of one of my most badassery songs, and one that still I listen to and I'm like, I can feel the teenage animosity here. Two Words from Antihero's album Unpretty. I still love that song. I still maintain all the emotions I felt when I wrote
Brings you
that.
right back.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, it's amazing how we're always different. Like whenever I say whenever I conduct, like I conduct Beethoven 5, a couple of years goes by between performances, I'm a different person. It's like looking at a great painting. You look at the Mona Lisa from a different angle, you see this perspective changes. And musicians like that too. We always changing perspective and how we're looking at things and how we're looking at our own careers and how we're exploring and experiencing new life events. I think it's great when musicians change.
For sure, for sure. And I wish more people had an open mind, right? Like I do understand people are loyal to bands and the sensibility and the sound that they fell in love with. I totally get that. But at the same time, music is an art form, and any art form needs to naturally evolve, especially because people change, right? Life circumstances happen, major events happen, perspectives change. Even, just traveling to a different country for a week could change your perspective on everything, just because you see things that you've never personally experienced. And all of those things from an artistic stance are going to be incorporated in terms of how you approach the world and how you approach whatever art that it is that you're creating and that you're performing. And so for something to be stagnant, I mean, I actually think it does the band a disservice. I mean, I'll give you a classic example. AC/DC are one of my favorite bands, right? I love them. They're very good at what they do. People know what they can get out of AC/DC. But at the same time, have they actually artistically grown? Have they evolved? No. They're still making those incredible riffs and those incredible banging hits that everybody wants to mosh to and, sing along to. And that's fine. That's awesome. But in terms of artistic evolution, there really hasn't been a lot of growth and development. They're sticking to a formula that's worked for them. Alanis Morissette, on the other hand, she starts out as a pop artist. Then there's the Jagged Little Pill era. Then she gets into this weird kind of holy sensibility era. And now she's sort of in this weird mix between adult contemporary with splashes of rock and splashes of pop. And hey, that's cool. I mean, I don't love everything that she's done. That's fine. I love everything that AC/DC has done. I don't love everything Alanis has done. However, I can respect that artistic evolution and her allowing herself to really do what felt right at the time. So is one band wrong and one's not? Absolutely not. I just think that it does a disservice to our musicians and the people that we really love to not allow them to artistically evolve if that's what they want to do. I really think that we have to give people a little bit more room and not just try to fit them into a little box, right? And I mean, I think that goes without saying for everybody, right? Even I'm a female rock musician. What does that mean? It means whatever the hell I want it to mean. Damn it.
I love it.
It doesn't have to mean anything. Just like, you're a classical conductor. What does that mean? Whatever the hell you want it to mean. However you feel that it should mean. I mean, I think when it comes to life, not just music, but we really shouldn't feel like we're so confined and constrained to boxes and, labeling people. Just be whoever the hell you want to be and be unapologetic about it and be proud.
I tell everyone that COVID has made us all philosophers as musicians because our primary reason for raison d'etre is to be on the stage performing, right? That's what we love to do. That's what we've dedicated our lives to. And that's been taken away from us in a way. So for me, I was supposed to be making debuts in Vienna and Prague, and all of a sudden, I'm like at home cleaning the leaves out of my backyard. And I said, I got to do something else. I got to go back to creating again. So I came up with this idea with my 21-year-old son to form this show and to start interviewing artists. And then I said, I love rock and contemporary music. I'm like, I need to start talking to other genres as well. It's like a conversation back and forth. And you can see with artists like such as yourself, who are such deep thinkers and hard workers and care about your craft. And it's really rewarding. I learned so much.
And I think that goes without saying, right? I think that, everybody has that opportunity and that propensity to be able to philosophize about things. We just have to have that opportunity to do so, right? And I think that when you're stuck at home, I mean, and you have very limited ways of expressing yourself, it's going to come out in different ways. I hope it's just coming out in healthy ways, right?
What are some of your self-discoveries during this wild period since we're off the performance stage primarily?
My self-discovery during this period, I think honestly, just knowing that it's okay to take time to rest and to recuperate. And I mean, I say that as somebody who's absolutely been a workaholic, and I've driven myself crazy, and I've worked to the point that I've been sick, and I've gone on stage where, I've had a fever of 103 and I felt like I was going to pass out. And then I did after the performance, but I was able to keep it together. So I think it's just understanding honestly and having that balance for yourself and not being too hard on yourself. I mean, I'm 100% somebody who's all for working hard and working towards your dreams and making sure that, if this is what you want to do, be passionate about it, put in your full effort. But at the same time, you also have to realize that everybody has their own limitations, and that's not a bad thing. It's okay to be honest with yourself. It's okay to be like, you know what, today I'm going to stay in my pajamas and I don't feel like putting on makeup. And that's okay. I'm still okay. That's fine. You're allowed to give yourself those kind of allowances. So, I mean, as much as I really hate not being able to go out there and perform, and I miss it. I miss even speaking with musicians backstage, talking about gear and the stuff. Like, just, it's not just about being physically on the stage and performing with my band and also interacting with the audience. It's also about interacting with fellow musicians. I mean, it's such a joy to be able to talk to musicians and hear what they have to say, and just get into these little chats about the industry and their views and stuff. Not having any of that sort of connection to that community really, really sucks. So you have to find other ways to just sort of do a little bit of self-exploration. And I think for me, this has been an important time to really reevaluate and relax and recuperate, because I was going really, really hard for, several years there. And I think it's okay. The universe has decided we need a break. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in that.
Have you been doing a lot of virtual performing?
I have done none.
Really?
I refuse. I outright refuse for a couple of reasons. Number one, when you put something on the internet, it's there forever. It takes away that joy and that real live experience, and it's not the same thing. I mean, if I want to perform for people, I want it to be the legit thing where I'm experiencing their energy and they're experiencing mine, and we're making that real connection. It's not just something that they're watching kind of out of the corner of their eyes. They scroll through 5 other things, within the next 30 seconds. Like, to me, it's about that real connection, and it's not real. It's not tangible when it's all done in a virtual capacity. It doesn't have that same sort of fulfillment from an artistic stance, but I also don't think it has the same sort of fulfillment in terms of that audience connection. I feel like it's doing people a disservice just to say, oh, just live stream. It's not the same experience. Don't kid yourself. It's not. I mean, it's fine if you want to watch one of those and you're enjoying it. Hey, that's fine. Again, no judgment, but to me, it's not the same, and it's not something I'm interested in doing. And I think one of the unspoken truths about it is it's assuming everybody's at the same socioeconomic level and they can easily just grab a fancy video camera and a fancy audio console and be able to, in their attic or their basement or their garage, make a high quality sounding video. And I think it honestly puts independent artists such as myself at a huge disservice, because not everybody has that setup. I mean, I'm in my living room right now. I don't have, an incredible jam space that I really want to share with the world in my private dwelling that would sound good and look good. I don't. Not everybody has that capacity. So I don't want to be putting a product out there that doesn't represent what my band can do at their full potential. I'd rather you come see us live.
Have you spent a lot of this time writing new material and in the studio?
No, I haven't.
Huh. So you're waiting for the stage to return. You're waiting for live music to come back. You've spent this time. This is interesting. Everyone's so different and unique with this. I've 135 people I've interviewed, 135 different ways of dealing with COVID. It's amazing to me. And I think that, finding time, because you're going to be back to your career. It will come back soon. It'll be, and you will be ready. You'll be being energized and ready to just jump back in.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, everybody's going to deal with this kind of hiatus, so to speak, in different ways. I know that a lot of my fellow musicians have decided to get back into the studio, and I think that the world is going to be overwhelmed with new material. I have plenty of new material that I could record, but honestly, I'm taking a mental break, especially because, I had some family circumstances that happened in the last year that needed my attention, frankly, more. And I mean, that's not to say anything as a disservice to music, but my cat, and this is going to sound perhaps ridiculous, but to any people that consider animals part of their family, my cat, who was 17 years old, he passed away, and that was heartbreaking for me. I still get upset when I think about it. I needed a little mental break for myself there. And then, unfortunately, hitting even bigger close to home, 5 months ago, my older brother passed away.
Oh,
So
sorry to
I've
hear
had,
both.
yeah, I've had two major losses this past year, as my family has too. And, in circumstances like this, I think it's really, really important to be able to refocus your energy on the things that matter the most. And that's truly family and friends and connection with people. And so, yes, music isn't really part of my life at this point, but that doesn't mean that I haven't been trying to focus on the things that are really important and that have needed my attention in a greater capacity. So, I have reoriented myself in that way, and it's what I needed to do, and it's what I needed to do for my family, and I don't have any regrets with that. When the world is ready for music, I will be ready to get back involved. It might look a little different, but we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yeah, I think a little difference is going to be interesting as we go to the other side. Thank you for sharing that. You could see why people are just raving about your music and about you and how much they really enjoy your mark, because it really is a reflection of who you are. You're very honest, very caring, and that's really comes across. I can't wait to see you on the stage one of these days.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So tell us about your nonprofit that you've been affiliated with, Music Saves. When did you
Yeah.
start thinking about Music Saves?
So I started thinking about music saves, honestly, probably a lot earlier than I actually got involved in it. And the reason for that is because so many of my fellow musicians throughout my life, even starting out as a teenager when I was really getting involved in the rock and roll scene, I just saw way too many rock star tragedies where people were getting involved with drugs and alcohol and didn't have an appropriate way, or a healthy way, I should say, of coping with whatever they were going through. So they're turning to these substances and, not only annihilating their own lives, but everybody around them that cared about them, right? And just creating this distance, in the worst case, or in the best case scenario, and in the worst case scenario, losing their life. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that a lot of people I used to tour with are not with us anymore, because of overdoses and that kind of thing. And I mean, it truly breaks my heart, because these are very, very talented people who have got amazing potential and amazing, things that they wanted to share with people, but just so troubled and not knowing how to cope. And I think that we can have all the education we want in the world, but something like that is not innate. There's no right or wrong way you can teach people how to cope. It's something that you really have to figure out for yourself. And unfortunately, not all of us are in circumstances where we're given the appropriate environments to help with us cope either. So we might come up with some not so great habits. So with all that backstory and, experiencing personal tragedy with friends and family member, and just seeing them go through these things and not knowing how to deal with it, I thought that trying to take a pivot and a focus with what I do, emphasizing mental health and straight edge lifestyle, was really, really important. So I started to really try to promote that more actively when I went solo in 2010 with my first solo album. And I started to get really heavily involved with different non-for-profits, whether it was making sort of inspirational or guidance sort of videos, or emceeing for special events, or trying to help fundraise for different mental health initiatives. So that's something that I still do to this day, and something I'm very passionate about, because unfortunately, I think, as I said, you can't teach somebody to cope. They have to really figure out what's going to make the most sense for them. I just think that there's, unfortunately, especially in rock and roll, there's the easy way out. It is really emphasized, and it's really, really ingratiated in the lifestyle, and that's not, I think, a good message to be promoting. I don't think we should be glamorizing sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I don't think we should be telling people to use this as a form of escapism. I mean, heck, it's healthier just to watch a movie and turn your mind off, watch a stupid Adam Sandler comedy and just turn your mind off from the real world, than it is to, go get high and not be able to cope. So mental health is really, really important to me. And I wanted to try and be able to promote that message in I guess in addition to what I was doing musically, because it's also something that I've written about heavily in my lyrics. Like I guess probably the song that is the most personal to me out of any of the songs I've ever written in my entire career lyrically would be called Darkest Days. And that was about my own struggle with manic depression as a teenager, and feeling a lot of the time in the world like I was completely alone and alienated, and like nobody else understood me or what I was going through. And it wasn't that I didn't have supportive friends and family, but it wasn't enough, right? And just feeling like nobody else gets you, you're entirely alone, like you've got nothing, no one to cling to, nobody to relate to. So being able to put that out into the world and tell people, guess what, I have gone through that myself, and I'm telling you this because I want you to know you're not alone.
Some of the best advocates. That's really incredible, and can continued success with that, because boy, we lose so much great talent, and people have to know how to deal with these issues in a healthy way, and to have someone to look up to, it's so important.
I couldn't possibly agree more. And
Don't you wish we could go back to people like Jimi Hendrix, or some of these like legends in the field, Kurt Cobain, and people who have so much to give, and their silence so early.
Absolutely. And I mean, again, I'm not making any judgment calls on people's lifestyles. I mean, people make different choices for different reasons. I just don't think the message that we should be promoting is A, drugs are cool, because they're not, and B, that they're a good way of coping, because they absolutely are not. I would rather people, journal, or, slam a guitar, or, hit a kick bag, or go out in nature, or, watch
hit the gym.
Yeah, exactly. Just try to find a healthier way of channeling what you're going through. And, whether that's even just listening to music. I mean, I know when I'm really angry, blaring some Courtney Love, man, she gets it.
I put on some Nirvana myself. Yeah, it's great. Get out that, go to the gym, find a way, find an outlet that's healthy. I mean, I try to tell this to my undergraduates. You have to find a way of coping with your emotions that's going to be healthy in the long run. I'm 46, Absolutely. And I want to see these people get there, grow.
Absolutely. And as I said, I think also part of the messaging is not glamorizing, the Dead at 27 club. There's nothing cool about it. It's nothing short of tragic.
Heartbreaking.
Absolutely.
Because those artists had so much to give. If they had another 20, 40 years of music, could you imagine what that would look like?
Well, I know. And I mean, somebody like Jimi Hendrix or Kurt Cobain, I mean, both so talented and both such incredible figureheads for what they spoke for that generation, right? I mean, the way Jimi Hendrix played guitar when he came out, nobody was playing guitar the way that he did. It was literally revolutionary. It truly was. What he did with his Strat, like, my God, mind-blowing. And to not be able to grow artistically and evolve and see where that could have gone. And I mean, same with Kurt Cobain. I mean, he was kind of like the rock and roll John Lennon of the 90s. I mean,
he destroyed glam rock forever. That was the end of that.
Totally. And I mean, there's not to say that there aren't other incredible artists from those eras that are still with us. Absolutely. But to have somebody's life cut short at such an early juncture because of things that could have been prevented. I mean, there's a huge difference between somebody being in a terrible accident, it's just happenstance, versus somebody overdosing, or, somebody taking their own life. Like, those are preventable tragedies. And I really think that we need to have safer and more open dialogue about mental health, and let people know, hey, it's okay if you're feeling this way. Feeling this way does not have to be a bad thing. What is a bad thing is that if we can't help you cope with it. So I'm glad that at least, in the last 5-10 years, there's become so many more resources available, because I really do think it's important. I think it's important that we destigmatize mental illness and mental health issues, and not just talk about physical ailments and physical issues, because mental health issues can be just as debilitating. Absolutely. I know, I went through stuff myself, so I get it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's so important. Where can artists, we have so many people watching the show, where can artists go if they have questions, if they want to talk to someone? What do you recommend?
I think there are a lot of different I'd say local oriented mental health hotlines. I mean, it also depends on what country you're in too. I mean, I know that Canada is really, really big on promoting Bell's mental health week and mental health month all the time. And I know that there's a lot of local charities like here in London where I am. There's Mind Your Mind, which is a great charity that I've been aligned with too. Oh, there's a really, really great one out of Kitchener too, and the name is just on the tip of my tongue right now. Oh my gosh. I'm trying to think. I can't think of what it's called right now. It will come to me after this interview, of
Of
course.
course, that's the way it is. Live
The,
without a
the,
doubt, these interviews.
yeah, for sure. The big event that I've been involved in as an MC for the last couple of years is called Defeat Depression, and I believe that is a nationwide campaign in all of Canada. Like we have local divisions, but the one that I've been focused on is with in London, and I know that they have had different alliances with different resources that are available, but I would go local first and try to see what's available. But yeah, there are a lot of wonderful resources out there. And I know even if you do a Google search, if you just want to try to chat with somebody, there are a lot of free chats with mental health professionals. They're anonymous. I mean, if you need that, please don't ever feel ashamed and like you can't take advantage of those resources because they're there for a reason. I think they're really, really important.
Well, thank you for your advocacy. It's very, very important. And I always say, anyone who glamorizes the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, I say watch behind the music, or or listen to some of the great artists who've recovered and they're back on the road. They wouldn't be alive if they were like still having the lifestyle.
Oh, I mean, yeah,
they've had to make the adjustments, and they're some of the best advocates for listen to these people. They're incredible stories.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, it's incredible some of the things that people have lived through too.
Steven Tyler gave an incredible, and I did it on the Joe Rogan show. I watched him on what a character. Anyway, listening to, I met him in New York. I saw him in New York City, in the Village once. I was like, oh my God, that's Steven Tyler. But hearing him talk about, he goes, when I'm off the wagon, I get fired from my own band.
Right.
And I'm like, that to me was striking, and he was very honest, and there's nothing glamorous about it.
No, it's not. And I mean, again, that's really, I think, an image that we need to stop pervading into the public eye. I mean, I have a lot of issues with certain images that are being popularized that I don't necessarily think are positive for people. And I will summarize it by saying, find your own path, find your own journey, find what makes it work for you. Don't feel like you need to be anything that you're not, and don't feel like you need to fulfill any sort of expectations that other people have of you. You know who you are deep down. And if you don't, do some introspection and figure that out. And there's nothing wrong with that.
That's for everybody. I mean, at any stage
Absolutely.
of your life. And to always kind of see, and how important is it to have a support system around you in the music business, in your experience?
Well, I think it can stop you from going crazy for sure, because
we all need that.
Well, I think the thing is, it's honestly odd sometimes trying to have conversations with lay people who are not involved in the industry with the industry and how it actually functions, because I don't think they necessarily understand some of the complications that musicians deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? Like the classic example, oh, wow, it's so cool that you were on the road for, this long, and, wow, how about all the sights you see? And I saw a classic meme on Facebook the other day that I thought was hilarious and just so accurate. So it had fans' perception of what it means to be on the road, right? And it's showing this photo of, the band on stage with this massive crowd. And then it said the band's perception of what it's actually like. And what it was is it was showing the view out of a van, a really old, crummy van, seeing all these highway signs driving by and, a McDonald's over in the background. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's about right.
I think that it's important to be able to bitch to your fellow musicians because we get it, right? We've all been there in one way or another. It doesn't matter what genre it is, right? We've all had really terrible gigs. I've been electrocuted probably 3 times at this point now. Yeah, good times. And then we've all had those gigs where you're like, man, I wish everyone could be that way. It was so, so awesome. And I mean, it's great to have family and friends who are supportive and wonderful and there for you. But if they don't necessarily understand the lifestyle, sometimes they can't always relate and empathize. So I think it's important for musicians to have fellow musicians that they can bitch about the music industry with.
So important. So how can people find out more about you and your work as you get to getting ready to take the stage again?
So if you just go to my official website, which is just my name, Rose like the flower, Rose, Cora, Cora, and then Perry like Joe Perry from Aerosmith, Perry.com. So rosecoraperry.com. All of my socials, which I love and hate, are on there, and you're always welcome to send me a personal message, and I'll do my best to get back to you too. So I'm always happy to hear from people and connect with them, and I really, really appreciate everybody watching and giving me time on their Sunday evening. Well, they should be eating a nice dinner at this point.
Well, you watch. People are going to be watching this interview for a long time. You have such great things to say, and truly a unique artist who's made such an impact already, but has so much more to say. So I can't wait to see what that's going to be.
Well, thank you. I really, really appreciate that. And sorry for being so verbose today.
No,
it's been
please.
A while
So exciting. In fact,
music.
You have so much to say. I can't wait to have you back on the show. So let's once you start getting back on the performance, I want to hear what it's like. I want to hear coming out the other side. I want to hear that. So maybe the summer or in the fall. I definitely want you back on Music Matters.
Well, that would be awesome, and hopefully we'll be able to head back to New York when the border controls are lifted again. I love New York. It's such a cool city. I actually had the incredible pleasure of performing at CBGB's before it went by the wayside. So to me, that's like huge in rock and roll history, and I'm so, so very grateful for that experience. Such a cool city.
Well, I'll definitely catch you when you're in New York. You let me know, and we'll be there. Good. We'll have a big cheering section.
Nice.
Please support this artist, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much, Rose.
No, thank you again. I really appreciate it. It's such a pleasure meeting you, and thanks to everybody for tuning in. You guys are you're awesome. You rock. Thank you.
Continued success. Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. Remember, keep music alive.